This read aloud is called the Pony Express. Here are some things to think about. How do you communicate with family members and friends who live far away? Do these forms of communication take a long time or a short time? Many of these forms of communication had not been invented in the 1800s during the time of westward expansion. The setting for this story is also in the mid-1800s, when many people were heading west to start a new life. Do you know what the word express means? Express means to write or talk about something, but it also means to do something really quickly. I want you to listen carefully to determine the main topic of the read aloud and to learn about how the Pony Express helped people communicate with each other during the westward expansion. Here are some vocabulary words in our read aloud today. The first word is endurance. The ability to go on for a long time despite pain or discomfort. The next word is landmarks. Objects or structures on land that are easy to see and recognize. And the last word is route or route. A way to get from one place to another place. Let's begin. In the 1850s, mail delivery was not as fast as it is today. Airplanes had not yet been invented, and neither had cars. Railroads had been invented, but the railroad tracks did not run all the way across the country. Suppose you wanted to send a letter from New York to California over 150 years ago. The railroads could carry your letter from New York to Missouri. That might take a day or two, but the train tracks ended in Missouri. There your letter would have to be loaded onto a stagecoach like the one shown here. The stagecoach would be pulled by a team of horses. It would bump along dirt roads at 5 or 6 miles an hour. It would take almost a month for the stagecoach to carry your letter to California. In 1860, 3 businessmen came up with an idea. They thought people would be willing to pay extra to send a letter if there were a quicker way to deliver it. All they needed to do was to find a way to speed up delivery time. The idea they came up with was simple. They would have riders carry the mail on horseback and run a sort of relay race from Missouri to California. They figured that a single rider on a fast horse could travel very fast. He could go much faster than a stagecoach loaded with passengers and luggage. They knew that horses and riders would get tired, so the businessmen decided there would have to be rest stations along the way. The Pony Express was not an easy venture to start. The businessmen who started it had to spend a lot of money to get things set up before they could make any money. They hoped the U.S. government would support them and pay them to be official carriers of the U.S. mail, but there were no guarantees. After they decided which roads and trails to use, they had to set up stations along the route. One rider left from California in the west. At the same time, another rider left from Missouri. So riders traveled from both ends of the route to carry the mail as fast as possible. Finally, they had to hire riders and buy fast horses for them to ride. The horses were chosen for their endurance, or for their speed and their ability to continue on for a very long time. Riders were usually young men, 18 years old or younger. They had to be tough and loyal. Riders would ride a leg or small section of this route, changing horses at each station. This map shows the whole route of the Pony Express. It started in St. Joseph, Missouri, where the train tracks ended. The Pony Express went all the way to Sacramento, California. The thick red line on the map shows the route the riders followed. The pictures above and below the route show some landmarks the riders rode past. Pony Express riders had to be ready to jump into the saddle and ride 50 miles on a moment's notice. They rode in the scorching heat of the day. They rode at night by the light of the moon. They rode through rain, hail, and sleet. They galloped across dusty deserts and zigzagged up dangerous mountain paths. They rode across the wide-open prairie and through large herds of buffalo. There are stories of riders becoming lost in fierce blizzards and having to leave their horses on foot. Native Americans watched these riders and saw it as more evidence of an endless flow of people moving onto their land. Not only did a rider have to worry about himself, he had to worry about his horse too. Because the terrain was so varied, a horse could stumble and fall, or it could be spooked by wolves or stampeding herds of buffalo. Here is a photo of a Pony Express station that is still standing today. There are more than 150 stations like this one along the route. The stations were located about 10 miles apart. That was about as far as a horse could gallop before getting tired. They made swing stations where a rider could exchange his tired horse for a fresh one and then continue on the trail. They also had home stations where riders could stay and rest while another rider carried the mail to the next station. The riders waited at their home station until it was time to return with the mail that another rider had delivered. If all went well, this is what would happen. A Pony Express rider would come galloping up. He would jump off his horse. Another rider would be standing in front of the station holding a new horse. The new rider would unhitch the mail pouches from the old horse and hitch them to his horse. Then he would jump up on his horse and gallop away. The rider who had just completed his part of the journey would be fed a simple meal of bacon and beans. If he was lucky, there would be some cornbread too. Then he would get some much needed rest. Both riders and station masters try to save as much time as possible and to be as fast as possible in order to get mail to settlers quickly. The horse could move faster if it carried less weight. Here's a picture of another Pony Express station. This one is called Simpson Springs. It is located in Utah. You can see that this station is surrounded by a desert and there are mountains rising up in the distance. Can you imagine how hot it could be riding across the desert during the day and how cold it could be at night? And of course, the rider would be moving in a cloud of dust. The men who created the Pony Express were businessmen, and their goal was to make money. They wanted to make sure everybody knew about the service they were providing, so they made posters and ads like this one. It cost $5 to mail a letter via the Pony Express, which is the same as $130 today. In 1860, the American writer Mark Twain took a trip across the United States. He was traveling by stagecoach, but he and his fellow travelers kept an eye out for the Pony Express. In his book, Roughing It, Twain described his first sight of the Pony Express. "We had a consuming desire to see a pony rider, but somehow or another, all that passed us managed to streak by in the night. We heard only a whiz and a hail. The swift phantom of the desert was gone before we could get our heads out of the windows. But presently the driver exclaims, 'Here he comes!' Every neck is stretched further, every eye strained wider. Away across the endless dead level of the prairie, a black speck appears against the sky." In a second or two, it becomes a horse and rider, rising and falling, sweeping toward us nearer and nearer, growing more and more distinct, more and more sharply defined, nearer and still nearer. A flutter of hoofs comes faintly to the ear. In another instant, there is a whoop and a hurrah from our upper deck, a wave of the rider's hand, but no reply. Then man and horse burst past our excited faces and go winging away like a belated fragment of a storm. Mark Twain was not the only person who was excited about the Pony Express. Lots of people used the Pony Express to send letters. Unfortunately, the Pony Express did not last very long. This picture can help you understand why. The men on the ground and behind the Pony Express rider are setting up telegraph poles. Once the telegraph lines stretched across the country, it changed things. People in New York could send telegraph messages to California. A telegraph message could travel from New York to California in a matter of minutes. There was no way the Pony Express could compete with that. The Pony Express went out of business in 1861 after only 18 months of service. Although the Pony Express did not last long, people still remember the can-do spirit of the founders and the bravery of the riders who carried the mail. This statue of a Pony Express rider carrying mail helps us remember this significant event in American history. Let's take a look at our timeline. In the last read aloud, we added the Oregon Trail. In today's read aloud, we talked about the Pony Express. The Pony Express was used during 1860 and 1861, which was after many people had moved to the west on the Oregon Trail. Where should we put this picture on our timeline? We will put this picture of the Pony Express right here on the timeline. Here are some discussion questions. Feel free to pause the video in order to allow time to think and discuss. What was the main topic of the read aloud? What was the Pony Express? Why did 3 businessmen decide to start the Pony Express venture? Who carried the mail on the Pony Express, and how did they travel the route from Missouri to California? Why were the young men who carried the mail required to be small? What special characteristics did the horses chosen for the Pony Express need? Was the route for the Pony Express riders hazardous or safe? Why? How was mail carried along the Pony Express? Did one rider carry the mail the whole way? How did the Pony Express riders know where to go? Was the Pony Express venture successful? Why was the Pony Express only used for 18 months? The Pony Express only lasted 18 months before the telegraph made it easier, cheaper, safer, and faster to communicate from coast to coast. Why do you think people still remember and talk about the Pony Express, even though it existed for such a short time?